sounds good. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the first of this Numerai Quant Club with me, Michael Oliver. I'm the chief scientist at Numerai. I did my PhD at Berkeley in computational neuroscience. I've been at Numerai for 2.5 years. We're just trying to do this to connect better with the community, answer your questions, talk about quant-related things, maybe talk about papers that are relevant or interesting, and yeah, just try to get some of your more quant and compute-related questions answered. And so let me go back to the gallery view so I can see everybody. Perfect. So yeah, I kind of want to just have this first one to get some feedback from you, hear from you guys what you want to hear in this meeting, answer a bunch of questions that you guys have posted in Slido. And yeah, just kind of brainstorm on how to do this thing going forward and hear what you guys want to get out of this. So let's see. I guess let's, before I go to the Slido questions, for the people here, does anyone have anything they want to say or have any quick questions before I just start going through the Slido questions? I believe everyone can unmute themselves, so please go ahead and do so if you want to. No? Okay. Well, I will just jump right into some of the Slido questions. So the first one, Joaquim asked what data sets and feature types for signals would complement classic, e.g. price, volume, short-term reversal features. Does Yahoo data have future leakage? One, I don't know anything about the Yahoo data, so I have no idea about that. But regarding what types of features might be interesting, the very simple ones, like he mentioned, probably not super useful. We have a lot of like volume and price related features and momentum type features, but variants of them, nonlinear transforms of them, things that care about more time seriesy things could be useful. And also, yeah, any other kind of interesting indicators and filters you can learn on these things. But yeah, just also probably more non-standard things. Things you can, like new sentiment type things could be useful. Things you can scrape and do NLP with from the web could be useful. It's kind of up to you, but yeah, anything sort of simple, I would say probably not super useful. And what are my thoughts on lagged targets as features and signals? That's yeah, kind of like a momentum feature. It could be, it's worth trying. And yeah, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't hurt, but yeah, it's not. It is kind of just like a momentum type signal, so it's worth trying, but I don't have any super strong opinions about it. And next question, could we get a target that if submitted would give optimal TC given the metamodel in the era? Might be even more useful than the model prediction file. I thought about that. It's not super straightforward to do that, but maybe something like that is possible. Yeah, it's a little tricky. I'm not sure that's really possible, but we have some ideas for kind of reformulating how we do scoring and TC, and which may make some things easier. I'll talk about that maybe once I get through the questions and just to get some of your feedback on that. But yeah, basically doing the optimization before combining signals, which may make things a little bit more straightforward, but yeah, I'll get to that in a second. And Wigglemuse asked, what's the latest thinking about TC as a feedback mechanism? If TC doesn't predict the future much, what good is it? Yeah, TC, doesn't predict the future much. I think much is doing a lot of work there. It does predict the future to some degree, and there are clearly people who are doing quite well on TC. I think it's been working actually quite well as a feedback mechanism. Like, I feel like the diversity of models we're getting is higher than it's ever been. The people near the top of the leaderboard and submitting and staking a lot of NMR. There's a lot. I mean, if you just look at their correlation with the metamodel, I feel like these are near all-time lows, meaning that we have a lot. People are staking a lot of NMR on a much more diverse set of models, which I think is helping quite a bit. And I also think people who've had a hard time with TC and submitting more unique and interesting things, signals we don't have, are maybe staking less, which is meaning we have, which is also increasing the overall diversity of the meta model. And so overall, I think it's been good. I do understand the frustration with how volatile it is. But I think going to something like the half leverage on TC should help make it not too painful. And also, I mean, considering the history of the tournament, where the volatility was even more extreme, and the fact that TC is opt-in makes it seem not too bad, all things considered. And so I think it's, I do want to make it a little bit more sort of predictable, and but sort of on a longer time horizon, I think it is pointing people in the right direction. Let's see. Could Janum's asking, could we get a corr with the meta model in diagnostics for the regular tournament? I don't see why we couldn't do that. Now that we've released metamodel files, you should be able to do some of that yourself. But yeah, that's I don't see why we couldn't add more things to diagnostics. I think we have a lot of work to do to improve diagnostics as well. Joaquim asks, how do we optimize for TC Sharpe? That's a really good question. I don't have, I mean, I can't, that's sort of like the name of the game in a way. It's not, if we knew sort of how to do that, we could just sort of do it ourselves. It's extremely tricky. Clearly, some people are doing pretty well and have pretty high TC Sharpe. If you, I mean, just looking at the stats for those people, they have very low correlation with the meta model, but sort of very consistent correlation to the target. So, I mean, yeah, kind of the things we've been saying have low, I mean, yeah, low correlation to meta models, like, so yeah, more unique model, be very consistent, and have low feature exposure, all those sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, people always can find sort of one-off examples of things that look like they have good statistics that don't necessarily have good TC. And yeah, nothing is a perfect predictor because of tail effects, because of real returns, because of various things like that. But yeah, it's clear. I mean, clearly some people are doing quite well, and I mean, and some of these people are even selling their models. If it were me, I would probably start buying some of these more interesting high TC models and try to reverse engineer them. And that's probably what I would do, and see what I can sort of learn from that. But yeah, I mean, besides things we've already sort of said, I don't think I can give more guidance than that. So how do we determine TC leverage? Can we get different TC leverage levels simulated in diagnostics? Maybe, yeah, that's an, I'll put this into the bucket of ways to improve diagnostics. We can look into that. And Bohr asks, can you run us through how a hypothetical model with lots of exposure to feature X relative to target Y goes through a pipeline until TC is calculated? Sure, yeah, that's not, it's actually not that complicated. So what happens to your signals is they're basically ranked and Gaussianized, so they're basically all forced into a Gaussian distribution, and then they're weighted by your stake. and summed together, and the that weighted sum is then just re-ranked and re-Gaussianized, and then the tails are sort of accentuated by raising things to the, like a 1.5 power. Like basically you take the absolute value of it, raise it to 1.5 value, and multiply it by the sign. And that just has the effect of kind of accentuating the tails a little bit. We do that because we found, for our optimization, it's sort of important to have a linear relationship between the alpha scores and expected returns. And we found that that transform helped make that relationship more linear. But that signal is then basically just fed to the portfolio optimization, which tries to construct a portfolio from that signal. And that portfolio, the final portfolio that results from the optimization, is just weighted by the returns for the stocks in the portfolio to get the final return for the portfolio. And then you can do, then you can calculate the gradient of the portfolio with returns with respect to the weights that went into weighting the individual signals. And that is exactly what TC is. So we're not feature neutralizing you. We're not, which things we have done in the past, we're actually not doing any of these like kind of complicated transforms to your signal. But at the sort of aggregate portfolio level, there are penalties on exposures to features and factors. And so hypothetically, you could have a lot of exposure to a single feature in one direction, but if everyone else has exposure in the opposite direction, your sort of individual exposure isn't going to be canceled out before getting into the portfolio, but it would be canceled out by sort of other people's. So yeah, you're not sort of feature neutralized on an individual basis, but the whole portfolio itself has its feature exposure sort of controlled. I think that answers that as well as I can. Can we get longer text boxes to ask quant questions in the Slido? I don't know. I'll ask NJ about, I don't know what control we have over Slido and the text boxes, but you guys can all feel free to just message me too in Rocket Chat. Just send me a direct message if you have longer questions that won't fit into the Slido format. That's fine as well. I'll try to look out for those. And Bor asked another question. As I understand it, the different targets are neutralized against things like sector or currency. Which targets are the least and most neutralized? Yeah, that's a interesting question. I mean, it's not necessarily a question of least and most. There are, I mean, some of them are neutralized to more and less things. Some of them are done in sort of different ways, have like gross exposure controls, for instance. Some of the new targets released are neutralized to sort of more things and have the neutralization sort of balanced by levels and whatnot. So it's not just the overall target that is neutral to things, but like the extreme bends, for instance, might be also neutral to things. But yeah, I mean, generally things are all yeah, country and sector neutral completely. And some of them yeah, let's see, I'm trying to remember if any of them are feature neutral or have some feature controls. I think one of the new ones might, I don't recall off the top of my head. But yeah, these Nomi target is maybe one of the less neutralized versions. It's more, but it is still quite neutral. The other ones are maybe more neutral in some ways. I mean, I think some of the ones that have more bins are maybe less regularized. They're a little bit closer to regular returns, but they often tend to work worse, like the 7-level targets. It's kind of amazing how much regularization in the targets by this binning does help. But yeah, I think I answered that as well as I can right now. but let's see. Joaquin asked in chat, what are my thoughts on CNN on IGTD with respect to getting TC? What is IGTD? I'm not recognizing the acronym. Joaquin, you can unmute yourself and explain if that is faster.
Sorry, image generated tabular data, I think.
Okay.
So generating images from tabular data.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, yeah. I mean, the feature, like, yeah, it kind of it doesn't feel like the right tool, because you're kind of basically putting features next to each other and then making linear combinations, and then with nonlinears after it of other features. That it's kind of it's a little bit of a weird thing to do. It doesn't, I mean, it'll probably do work to some degree, and it might be sort of make something more unique, but I think, yeah, if I don't know if people have seen the some of that paper that was comparing basically like gradient boosted trees to neural networks on tabular data, and basically just showing it's very, very hard to beat gradient boosted trees, like when you actually tune these things, and they're sort of enumerating the reasons why. And I think a really important reason why is our gradient boosted trees are really good at considering the features on an individual level, and neural networks are basically always combining your features. At the first level, you're just kind of making linear combinations of your features. And when you have features that have like very different predictive power, very different properties, making linear combinations of them isn't necessarily the thing you want to be doing. And considering each feature alone and making splits on them is actually much more something that makes a lot more sense. Neural networks work really well when all your features are kind of the same sort of thing, like pixels. And it makes sense to make new features by linearly combining pixels, for instance. But for things that were like tabular data, where they're all sorts of different things, making linear combinations often hurts more than it helps. So yeah, I mean, and then when you're doing like CNNs and making on top of that, you're just kind of making kind of weird linear combinations of things. It might make you something unique, but yeah, it's not clear to me that that's sort of good.
So I probably want to disagree on the quip about gradient boosted trees versus neural networks.
Regarding what?
So I think some of the best models I have are all neural networks. And I mean, vernacularly, when we say gradient boosted trees, we essentially mean axis aligned gradient boosted trees. There are also other kinds of gradient boosted trees.
Sure. Yeah.
Things like trees with oblique splits. And there was something else you talked about a while ago, which is trees with linear models for leaves, which is another weird thing. I think LightGBM has this thing.
Yep.
So when it comes to neural networks, sure, I think if you take a MLP and you try to compare that against a gradient boosted decision tree model, I think an MLP will almost always lose. But I've had some degree of success with ensemble models, which is essentially ensembles of tiny little neural networks and things. Some sort of a sparse routing scheme. Most of these ideas are inspired from the world of language models and things.
Yeah.
And also transformers seem to do quite well. I mean, if you manage to get the hyperparameters right.
Yeah, no, I like for sure. Yeah, I mean, more exotic architectures I can see, like transformers and whatnot, things that can maybe are less. I mean, I guess they're probably still making linear combinations of things, but I can see more exotic architectures definitely being good than, I mean, being better than like an MLP. But yeah, I get, yeah, again, these things are all hard to tune and get the hyperparameters right. And so yeah, and I mean, yeah, and you have a lot of flexibility with neural network architecture, and you can do better like. I'm just curious. Are you using eras to train and whatnot? Are you using in the training?
Yeah, this was one of your ideas from what 2 years ago, right?
So that's one thing that I've been thinking a lot about. Like, we're actually talking internally about trying to make gradient boosted trees respect eras better too, because it's also somewhat unclear to me how, because like the way we train gradient boosted trees is kind of dumb. It doesn't respect eras at all. But then they still tend to work quite well. And it's like, well, what if we actually made the gradient boosted trees respect eras, and made their splits based on era statistics rather than just like on the statistics over the whole data set.
Well, I think at first glance, you could possibly try to train each tree on a different era.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, so yeah, and a product that I actually want to give Tim this quarter is to just try to dig into the guts of some decision tree programs. Maybe start with like the sklearn one, since it's like in Python and it's somewhat hackable. And yeah, instead of like when you do a search for splits, basically calculate something like the Sharpe of the whatever statistic you're using. Across all the eras, rather than just find the split that is the best according over the whole data set. Things like that. So yeah, I do wonder if like how, because I've seen some success with neural networks too, but I do wonder like how much of it is just like due to better, more flexible ways of training these things. And so yeah, definitely I mean, definitely neural networks can be made to work, but you'll definitely spend a lot more time on it. But it's fun to try to get it to work for sure. But yeah, so but yeah, I mean, I do think that what I said is true overall, just for tabular data. In that gradient, it's difficult to make like a general algorithm that will work better on tabular data than like a gradient boosted tree. But yeah, I mean, for an individual problem, you spend long enough, you can probably improve on things. But yeah, it's I do believe with enough, yeah, with you can always make a neural network work eventually if you spend enough time with it. That's been my experience. But yeah, it is. Can you tell us which targets are least exposed to momentum? They are. They're all factor neutral. Then they have their in that they are. So a momentum is one of the factors. So they're basically all momentum neutral. But there is. I'll caveat that by saying that there is like no necessarily one version of momentum. And so they might be more or less neutral to momentum at different timescales. Let's see. Okay, let's keep going. Does Nomi best reflect what the optimizer is doing with our ranked percent normalized? I would say, yeah. So Nomi doesn't necessarily best reflect what the optimizer is doing, especially with the fact we started accentuating the tails. I mean, one idea that we've played around with is basically you can change the bins from like say because right now they're at well, let's say you sit if you rescale your targets instead of being 0, 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, 0.1, if you basically multiply them by 4 and subtract 2, so now you're going from like -2 to 2. So you basically have the middle bin in a 0 in the middle. You could sort of accentuate the two extreme bins by making them like 2.5 or 2.7 or something to sort of simulate the the exponentiation. But I mean, so that's something you guys can do. I mean, that's sort of equivalent to changing your cost function and caring more about tails a little bit. But yeah, I mean, Nomi is not as neutral as some of the other targets that. But yeah, I mean, there is this sort of fundamental disconnect that is hard to sort of bridge between a good target and what the optimization is doing. And that's something we're always thinking about and trying to improve on. But there's reasons why it's just sort of fundamentally hard to make those things completely agree. I mean, for one, the optimization is basically, I mean, creating a portfolio that has to have certain properties rather than, and so that sort of necessarily means that a lot of stocks get sort of zero weight. So just giving you guys like the sort of optimized portfolio or something tends to not actually be that great of a thing to train on. It's sort of too sparse and not enough information. And there's other things like turnover that make a big difference for portfolio optimization that is sort of very hard to communicate in terms of targets in this sort of cross-sectional world of prediction you're trying to do. Let's see. Will we be releasing any more real new features in the future other than transformed or synthetic features? Sort of, yeah. So we have some other sort of real features that we have that we didn't release with this most recent release because they were sort of too high of churn. They're sort of pointed in very different directions, and we asked the data vendor about this, and they basically told us we need to basically do like a moving average. But one of the big things in the next release is basically learning more like time series features. So something you guys can't really do because you would need sort of stock identity across time to do. I'm planning to basically learn filters at various timescales of the features and then give those as sort of these new features. So they're basically sort of versions of the features that incorporate history of the existing features. But we'll be applying the same thing to some of these other new features to basically reduce the churn problem. So there'll be like time series transformed versions of new features that aren't currently in there, hopefully in the next release. So Wiggle Muse asks, often a single day change in TC, same round goes from 90th percentile to less than 20th percentile reverse. How is it so sensitive to big rank changes day to day? So I mean, yeah, I've noticed that too. It does seem to stabilize over time. I think it happens from what I've seen, at least, it happens mostly in the early days. And I think that's just due to having not that many days of returns to kind of accumulate, and yeah, for what I've seen, it mostly stabilizes by the end, which I think.
So what I'm getting at there is that it definitely is, yeah, the first week to 10 days, I don't pay much attention to it because it's really wild. But even later on, and it seemed to get worse lately, I think the markets are just crazy. But I'm wondering if you have an idea of what it comes down to when it does that later in the round in the market. Is it coming down to just 5 stocks, or does it have to be more of a wholesale shift if something happened? Yeah, I understand when the core shifts a lot in a single day, when all of our scores basically get worse or better, you're like, okay. But you know, when you're looking at rank changes between me and everyone else, and I was 80% yesterday, and now I'm 10, what happened? Maybe. What would be an example of something that would cause that? Would it be like 2 stocks just didn't do something that day, or does it have to be more? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I mean, it could be yeah, it could be down to a couple stocks that had like big moves. I mean, because sometimes you get a stock that moves 20 or 30% in a day, and maybe you were pointing in a direction to own that stock, and other people are pointing in the direction to not own it, and that could, yeah, that kind of thing could cause that, and especially, yeah, I mean, and because are the rank changes, or is the absolute score sort of it seems like you're mostly focused on the rank.
Yeah, I'm looking at the rank. It, like I said, if there's a wholesale shift and everyone gets lower scores, I'm like, okay, whatever. But I'm like, how did the order of things change so much? It doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes we have periods of relative calm, but then I'm like, we're on day 15 and I just dropped, and then the next day it's just, you know, it just tanks very quickly into the total opposite of what it was for 2 weeks. And it's just, now I'm dealing with now basically with the opposite of what you were talking about before a minute ago about the data set, is because I stopped trying. I started to have success with TC as soon as I stopped caring about corr at all. And the way I did that was I started messing with the data sets. So now practically everything I'm doing is with an altered version of the feature set. So linear combinations, nonlinear combinations, PCA, ICA, diffusion maps, all that kind of stuff. And I'm getting a whole new feature set, and my correlations with the metamodel are now from 0 to 20. So I'm pretty low. And so I'm expecting to see high volatility in TC. And somebody actually posted this on the forum recently, or in the Rocket Chat, where they showed that the farther away you get from the metamodel, the greater your variance on TC, somewhat to be expected. But the mean was about the same for everybody. And they were saying, you know, so don't do that. But I think that's a global thing where I wouldn't take that advice. But
yeah, no, I mean, because it's definitely like there's going to be some people who have very low correlation with the metamodel, but have very consistent TC, and some people are going to be much more volatile. Just, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways. There's like an infinite number of ways to have low correlation with the metamodel.
Right.
So,
and I am getting better TC now with these weird feature sets, where I don't do the feature set engineering is the complicated part, and then the modeling is basically a very simplistic, straight, you know, like even a linear model to get the final thing, and then I do some neutralization. But I also don't know, it's more of a shotgun approach where I'm making a lot of models like that and betting, or, you know, staking small amounts on a bunch of them. But I also know, as people have proven over and over, a totally random model can look just like that. So it's just a waiting game to see which ones are random and which ones are going to hold up.
Yeah. I mean, I do, someone related to that, someone just asked about the metamodel scores we've just released, and how to use those to improve things. So, I mean, I think us releasing the previous metamodel scores can actually be pretty helpful. Sort of
two more questions down for me.
Yeah, just like sort of as you're saying, to make it maybe a little bit less shotgun approach. Basically, you can sort of see, is your approach increasing, helping the metamodel? Is it, are you fixing errors that it's making? Are you making it worse in some eras? What you can sort of see, like, are you on average helping it? Helping, like and in what ways you're helping it?
Yes, with those scores, I can start to do some things. I haven't even looked at those yet.
Yeah,
I'm getting to that with the new data set now.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I think there's a lot of things potentially you can do, and to just get a better sense for just like basically create a model and then ensemble it with the meta model, and how does that change the Sharpe? I mean, if you're making the Sharpe go down relative to the meta model, that's probably not going to get you good TC overall. And so, I mean, for example, and you can try to get start looking in the tails of the meta model, look at the most extreme predictions, where those are the ones that are going to matter the most. Are you helping there? Are you improving the correlation there? Or are you hurting the correlation there? Because if you're just helping things in the middle, that's not good. Yeah, it's not going to be that's not going to help your TC very much, because it's not going to affect the portfolio very much. Yeah, it's actually on a related point, just looking at people's one thing I've been interested in is looking at everyone's predictions and where do people agree and where do people disagree. And it's people generally agree about the sort of middle bin. People are really maybe that's not surprising, but yeah, people have a lot of agreement about the middle bin and have sort of the most interesting disagreements in the tails. So, and the tails are really what matter. And the middle, I mean, everyone basically predicting a stock that isn't going to move is not very helpful. So yeah, getting that right is getting that more right is not going to be super helpful to you or anyone. So,
yeah, and I have several models that are sort of based on that, where I just throw out all of my targets are been just as you said a minute ago, where I switch them from negative to positive, so the middle is always 0. And then for a lot of the models, I throw out all of the 0 rows, and some of them I just classify positive or negative polarities, and then I do a big ensemble. I do all the targets, and so.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think people experimenting with getting, I mean, so as Jeremy says, the middle bin is overrepresented in the data set. So yeah, I mean, you could balance, remove a lot of those things and make sure that you're not training with so much stuff in the middle bin. You could accentuate the tails, you could resample the data, you can basically do polarity to just, is it going to go up or down?
All right, I'll move on.
Let's see. So is correlation with the metamodel the best predictor of uniqueness, given many agree in the middle portion? It's, I mean, best predictor, I mean, maybe not the best predictor in like a TC sense, but if you have a very low correlation with the metamodel, I think it's still informative. But maybe if you guys have better ideas for how to compute uniqueness, but I'd I'd be curious to hear. But yeah, you can come up with your own ways of computing it now that you have former metamodel scores, and yeah, basically think about trying to be unique in the tails or come up with your own metrics for that. Let's see. Next question. So yeah, Wigglemuse asked about reducing TC volatility. I will talk about that more in a second. And JRA asked, how do small changes in the optimizer impact TC? Depends on what you mean by small. Like a really small change doesn't change it that much, but we have that we haven't released. We had basically updated some optimizer changes that we're using in live, but we haven't actually shipped that to TC because we didn't want to basically create too much of a moving target for you. So TC, while we have changed our live optimizer, we haven't changed how TC is computed. And because yeah, we made a bunch of sort of small changes, but the aggregate effect was fairly large. Overall, people who had good TC now had good TC under the new thing, but the scores were also not super correlated at a population level. But yeah, I mean, they were correlated, but not like, there's still a lot of variance. And yeah, part of that is just due to how TC is computed, and it is sensitive to hyperparameters, and it is like it is volatile, partially just due to the way portfolios are constructed and taking gradients through that. So I guess, yeah, now's a good opportunity to talk about an idea that we've been playing with that I think could be a future for how things are scored and how TC is computed. And the idea is basically just that we run the portfolio optimization on your scores at an individual level, and then we create a meta model by ensembling these created portfolios, and then we compute TC with respect to these weights that are after the optimization. And so it's basically, because it is just like a linear combination after that, there's no taking a gradient through an optimization, which I think should make things quite a bit more stable, and should smooth things out. There's still this problem of how your score gets mapped to a portfolio that will be a bit black boxy, but it seems like that should be a little bit more straightforward to deal with than the current system. I'm curious to hear if you guys have any feedback about that.
So say that again, basically. Now, the original TC, it seemed, was problematic because it was taking into account your actual holdings.
Yeah.
I don't think you want to go back to that, right? So
No,
this is,
so
the
yeah,
optimizer is still a hypothetical.
there's sort of two ways we can do it, that really just have to do with whether or not we give you full turnover each week. So basically the idea in the most extreme version, which I kind of like, is everyone is a portfolio manager. You submit a signal every day or every week, and we create a portfolio using our portfolio optimizer that takes into account turnover and whatnot. And so you basically just have a running portfolio, and your score is basically based on how well your portfolio is doing individually and how much you're contributing to an ensemble of portfolios. So it'd basically be like a correlation individual type score and a TC type score. And so, because right now, basically your signals are stake weighted and then fed to the optimizer, and then the gradient's computed through the optimization to get with respect to those stake weights. This would basically be your signals are optimized to create a portfolio. The portfolios are then stake weighted, and then the performance of that ensemble portfolio is used to compute the gradients of those with respect to those stakes. And so I like this idea a lot. I mean, potentially we could even use it in production. Like the portfolio we would get out of such a thing would actually be a real portfolio we could trade. It's not clear to us right now whether or not we'd actually want to do that, but rather than ensembling things at the signal level and doing it as we're currently doing it, but we could.
So are you saying that then our signal would be affected, or our score today would be affected by something we submitted last week because there's a continuity there? Or
if in the most extreme version, yes.
That I wouldn't like, because I change things all the time. So
yeah, I mean, you
don't-
would probably want to have to change your behavior and just keep a model, keep an account sort of submitting the same model every week, because it basically is making you like a portfolio manager, and you have your own portfolio that you're managing, and you need to sort of like take into account like keeping it consistent over time and that sort of thing. That's the other version would basically be to just give you full turnover every week, and do it sort of like kind of like how so you get basically just turn your signal into a portfolio that is the optimal portfolio, and then ensemble that, and then then it becomes not a portfolio we could trade every week, because it would have too much churn, because there would be too much turnover week to week, but it might be good as a scoring mechanism. That's the other alternative, sort of like mid sort of compromise alternative.
On a related note that I've been meaning to ask, if we have these daily submissions, and there's a significant difference between the mass of weekly submissions and the daily submissions, which are possibly less, are you computing TC in theory the exact same way on that smaller set of things where our TC for Monday or Tuesday may not correlate very well with the weekend ones?
Yeah, it's, I think I think that is the plan, to basically compute it the same way, as sort of an incentive to get more people submitting, because basically it'll be easier to get TC on the days when fewer people are submitting, potentially, and it sort of functions as an incentive to try to get people to submit more regularly. Let's see. JRB had asked, why does the metamodel parquet file only contain 150 errors? Let's see if it wasn't updated last week. I don't know. I'll check on that. How can we locally compute metrics post applying the optimizer? Sounds like 2 steps of black box rather than 1 currently. Let's see. I think it's the same number of black box steps. I think it's actually a bit more straightforward. I think you'll be able to see correlations between your signal and your optimized portfolio a little bit more straightforwardly than yeah, a little more straightforwardly than having the optimizer after their signals combined with everyone else's. And I believe it should make things a bit less sensitive in terms of how TC varies over time. So I don't think it's just making it any more black boxy to do it that way. I actually think it should make it a little bit more interpretable. But there, we to go along with this, we are considering trying to do for like metrics and whatnot. Like we could essentially do a back test. You could upload your signal, and it basically turns it into a portfolio and back test that so you can actually get feedback on how your signal turns into a portfolio and how that sort of performs as a portfolio. Like I've been doing some thinking about how to actually give you some version of the optimizer you could use so you can compute these things locally. There are potential problems with that, just because like it relies on data that I don't think we can potentially give you. We may be able to give some transformed version of it that is useful, but yeah, there's sort of legal issues that make that a bit problematic. Let's see, any other questions? Oh, will we get daily targets? Did you test it with internal models? See how much training on that would improve performance? Daily targets, I mean, this is something we could do, and now that we have daily tournaments, we've talked about doing that. I doubt it would really help much over weekly. I mean, even weekly over monthly doesn't help that much, really. So it's hard to see that daily targets would really be that big of a benefit, but I think at least via the API, we will probably be releasing daily targets so that if you really, really wanted them, you could get them. I don't have, I think it's something, yeah, we've talked about it and want to do, but I'm not sure it's in the plan, but right now, but it will come eventually. Andy's asking, when staking is enabled for daily, are we still going to be able to do that thing you talked about where late submissions can be rolled over, staked for the next day? Yeah, let's see. I don't recall what the final decision on that. I mean, I think there's going to be a window in which your stake, I think, yeah, basically there's going to be a window in which you have to submit for it to be counted. I think it's going to be like a 24-hour window you have to submit within for it to be counted in towards some meta model. Yeah. So I think that should answer your question. If the thing submitted, 'cause I think there's going to be like a small window for this, for like including, that's going to sort of overlap with the same day, but the ones that won't make it within that will go into the next day. So yeah, so one of the new targets, Ralph, does look a little bit better than Nomi. Has some takes into account some more things that are related to actual trading, and we are planning to at some point soon switch what target you're scored on away from Nomi. So I believe to Ralph, but I'll have to check on that. So yeah, I think but yeah, I do want to I always think your best bet is to train on multiple targets and ensemble. Just focusing on a single target, I feel like is never going to be as good as you can do just by like looking at multiple targets. Just having multiple views on returns is extremely helpful. But yeah, is all the 60-day scoring stuff now a totally dead idea? So yeah, one of the ideas for the 60-day scoring was that it would help smooth out TC. We did investigate that internally. It didn't actually really seem to make it less volatile, really, at least not enough to make it really worth changing things. Also, yeah, it's just a really long time to wait for scoring. It's already, I mean, you guys already have to wait about a month to really see rounds finalized and get final feedback. Stretching that out to 60 days doesn't yeah, it didn't really seem worth it to us. But yeah, I do think you should all be training on 60-day targets. I think 60-day targets are great for training. 4-day target, that's unlikely to come back. But yeah. Yeah, partially just but it's possible we might actually look at shorter term targets again as we're moving into trading more regularly. But yeah, I mean, models that have high turnover are not super great for us, because trading costs money, and there's even if sort of like the optimal portfolio, like you can't actually trade into the optimal portfolio every day because it just would cost more than you would make. And so turnover constraints are like a real big constraint, and actually one of the main sort of disconnects that's hard to communicate to you guys in terms of problem structure. And so yeah, we're continually trying to think about better ways to do that, but because of just the cross-sectional nature of the problem, and the fact that turnover, you kind of need to know like era-to-era stock identity, it's very tricky to communicate, to sort of set up the problem in a way that you guys can make low turnover models. And we sort of enforce that by the choice of features we give you, but yeah, that's an imperfect way to do it. Well, looks like we're coming up pretty close to an hour. Does anyone have any final questions or comments or things they'd like to say or ask for future?
NumerCon, good question. Richard and I were joking the other day about just having it at the same venue again, because it kind of suited our needs pretty well. And the Deconsecrated Church in 2019 was also very cool, but something about the Scottish Rite Masonic Centre felt like it was a kind of like a pop-up conference in a lot of ways, like it suited our vibe very well. Yeah, I mean, I'll probably send out a questionnaire on Rocket Chat like I've done in the past, trying to gauge interest and ideas for times of year that might suit people. I don't know if we should try and aim to do it in April again or September, which is September, October is kind of where we would have preferred to do it. But if you have ideas, suggestions, speakers you'd like to see, you can just drop me a message on Rocket Chat or email me, nj@numerai.ai. And yeah, we'd love to hear your ideas and get everyone together again. Anything else, MDO?
No, yeah, so yeah, thanks for all the questions, everybody. I think next time I'll try to go a little, I'll try to have a topic that I will like a paper or something related to the tournament that I'll talk a little bit more about. For if you guys have any other things you want to see, please just send me messages in Rocket Chat. And yeah, I'll try to answer any questions I can there. And if it seems relevant, talk about it next week. Yeah, if you have any ideas for things you want me to cover, please send suggestions. So yeah, I'm really curious to hear about your experiences with using the new data that we've just released. That's something that we've been thinking a lot about internally. That's something on my mind. What would be the frequency of these? I think we were thinking bi-weekly, or I guess like every 2 weeks. Was that right, NJ?
I feel like bi-weekly means twice a week. I always fight with my husband about this. I feel like fortnightly is every 2 weeks. So shall we just say twice a month?
Let's say twice.
That's it down the middle. Maybe twice a month, but no, not half monthly. Maybe. We do have the fireside coming up, and I think that we're planning it for like mid-Feb or something. I can double check my calendar, but yeah, it might. We'll try to make it not in the same week as that. So we'll send out an update maybe like a week before the next call, when MDNO figure out when that is.
Cool. Well, yeah, thank you guys all for showing up, and please send any feedback. This is my first time doing such a thing. It's been kind of fun. I was a little nervous, but please, yeah, just let me know what you think if you have any suggestions or any further questions. And I hope more of you guys go on video next time so I can see you.